Red and green lights flashed on the wet pavement. Officer Rebecca Hayes eased her patrol car to a stop behind the black SUV. The car was going 7 miles over the speed limit, nothing to think twice about most nights. But something about the way it swerved just before the incident broke caught her attention. She sighed, shaking off the tension that was creeping up on her shoulders. It had been a long shift, the kind that made her wonder why she hadn't taken a desk job. Her supervisor kept pushing her, but no, Rebecca wasn't made for paperwork. She liked the unpredictability of the road, the feeling that at any moment, the smallest thing could turn into something bigger. But there were times, like right now, when her instincts told her something was wrong. She put her hand on her gun holster, pushed open the door, and stepped outside. Boots crunched on the gravel. The air carried the familiar scent of exhaust and wet asphalt, a remnant of a light rain that had passed earlier. The driver didn't move. His hands were locked on the wheel, his fingers clenched so tightly that his knuckles were white under his dark skin. Something was wrong. Most drivers were fumbling for their licenses, peeking into their mirrors, or doing something other than sitting perfectly still, like they were preparing for a collision. She stopped right in front of the driver's window. He hadn't even rolled it down. Rebecca pressed her knuckles to the glass, her voice steady. "Evening, sir. License and registration." A slow, almost deliberate movement. The man reached toward the glove compartment with one hand, keeping the other in plain sight. Good. He had manners. The window slid down, just enough for her to see him better. Early 40s, sharp features, unblinking eyes. There was something about that gaze that made her flinch, an unsettling familiarity, as if she had seen those eyes before. Then she saw it. A tattoo on the inside of his wrist. Sharp black ink, 3 digits faded by time, but still distinct enough to make her blood run cold. Rebecca's stomach clenched. She had seen that number before. A murder 8 years ago. A family brutally murdered. The number was found carved into a bloody wall. The killer was never caught. Her breath caught. The man across from her smiled faintly, a slow, calm smile. "We meet again, Officer Hayes." His eyes were dark, like a deep lake that reflected no light. Rebecca tried to read his expression, but everything was perfectly controlled, too perfectly. There was no hint of alcohol in the air, no slouch in his movements. His movements were precise, and yet there was something off. "Mind telling me, where are you going tonight?" she asked, her voice trying to be calm. The man didn't answer right away. His fingers tapped the steering wheel once, a small movement, but a crack in the otherwise perfect surface. Then he held out the registration form, the movement strangely slow. "Just passing through." His voice was calm. Too calm. Rebecca took the document, her eyes scanning the printed words. Brandon Ellis. The name didn't ring a bell. But she'd check the system in a moment. That was when she saw it. His jacket sleeve had slipped down, revealing a portion of his forearm. A tattoo. A simple circle, in a faint black ink. At first glance, it didn't catch her attention. But then, a chill ran down her spine. She recognized the symbol. She'd seen it once before. Just once. And that was enough. The air in her lungs was sucked out. A buried memory rose, breaking the surface like a ghost. A night at the academy. Whispered stories among the officers. An urban legend? No. An unexplained truth. A group of officers disappeared. No bodies. No trace. There was only one thing left. That mark. The mark she now saw before her eyes. Rebecca's fingers tightened around the registration form. She needed to stay calm. But the man had noticed her hesitation. She could feel his eyes on her, waiting. His voice was calm as he spoke. "Is something wrong, officer?" Her throat was dry. The radio in the background was staticky, the sound of cars whizzing by in the night. But all of it paled in comparison to the thought that overwhelmed her. This was no coincidence. Something was very, very wrong. And she was not ready for what was coming. Rebecca felt her blood run cold as her eyes met the symbol. Once again, she had only confirmed what her intuition had told her. There was no mistaking it, it was the same mark she had seen years ago, in a case that had never been made public, a case buried so deeply that even those responsible had stopped asking questions. Memories flooded back, taking her back to 2009. The night she had first heard about it. She had been a rookie, fresh from a year of training. The veteran officers had whispered to each other in the break room, their voices falling silent as she entered. A team from a neighboring police station had gone out on an anonymous tip about a suspect hiding in an abandoned house. They had gone inside, turned off their radios. None of them had returned when reinforcements arrived. And when the next team went in, they found an empty house. No body. No blood. No sign of a struggle. There was only that symbol, etched into the rotten wood. She had asked about it, only once, and Sergeant Hayes had stopped her immediately, as if she had mentioned something forbidden. Some things have no explanation, Hayes, he had said, and she had let go. Or at least, she had tried to. Until now. The symbol was no longer a vague story whispered among drunken cops. It was right there in front of her. She clenched the registration document in her hand, feeling the paper wrinkle between her fingers. Forcing herself to calm down, she took a deep breath through her nose, released her hand, relaxed. She tapped the roof of the SUV, a simple gesture that conveyed nothing more than calm professionalism. Wait here. She turned, walked toward the patrol car. No rush. Couldn't rush. Each step felt heavier, as if her body were reacting to an alert her mind hadn't yet registered. A feeling in her gut screamed a warning. She was watching this man, but, could it be, he was watching her? The car door closed. Locked. She reached for the train's computer, typed in the name, Brandon Ellis. The file came up. It was clean. No criminal record, no parking tickets, no warnings. It couldn't be. Everyone had a fingerprint, even the most law-abiding citizens. But not him. Her hands remained on the keyboard, but her gaze wandered out the window. A thick silence fell, as if the world had held its breath. She had been afraid of the stories whispered in the break room. But this was no longer a story. This was reality. And she knew, from this moment on, there was no going back. Rebecca Hayes tapped the dashboard, her eyes scanning the records that had just appeared on the screen. Brandon Ellis. A name floating among the faint trail of paperwork, a library card, a voter registration, a scattered work history. But now, he was no longer a name. She frowned. A ghost? Maybe. A ghost from the past, someone connected to what had happened that night. Instinct urged her to seek backup. Her fingers tightened on the radio. This is Officer Hayes. Running an extended background check. A sudden movement from the SUV in front of her made Rebecca's entire body tense. Her hand hovered over the grip of her gun, ready to react. She glanced up, eyes locked on the driver. He hadn't moved. But the passenger door wasn't locked. Not a sound. No warning. She swore she'd been watching him every second, but somehow, the door had opened. She wasn't just doing a routine stop anymore. The SUV's brake lights flashed. The engine shuddered to life. A cold feeling crept through Rebecca's gut. He was going to run. And she couldn't let him. Her hand shot up, pressing the radio down. I have a suspect on the run. The SUV's tires screeched against the asphalt, the smell of burning rubber filling her nostrils. Tactical instincts overrode her, and Rebecca slammed on the gas, the cruiser roaring forward, kicking up loose gravel. The SUV swerved onto the highway, headlights bouncing through the darkness. He was running. And that told her all she needed to know. Innocent people don't run. Not like this. Not with that instinctive precision, as if he'd done this before. Rebecca gritted her teeth, her hands tightening on the steering wheel. Suspect fleeing southbound on Route 43. Black SUV, no license plate behind. Requesting immediate backup. The siren's scream tore through the night, joining the pounding in her chest. She felt the weight of something larger pressing down on her. Something darker, deeper. Brandon Ellis. He was more than just a man with an expired license. He was a mystery. And tonight, she had to solve him. The SUV veered sharply to the right, its tires grinding into the road, leaving a trail in the darkness. Rebecca gripped the wheel, her eyes locked on the rearview mirror. For just a moment, she caught his gaze, a gaze that wasn't panicked, not rushed. It was calm, cold, and calculating. It unsettled her more than the mysterious tattoo on his wrist, more than the long list of missing officers. This wasn't some random run. It was planned. Targeted. Like he knew exactly where he was going, even before she began chasing. The tires screeched as Rebecca swerved after him, her breath coming in short gasps. She almost lost sight of him as the SUV cut across the road, disappearing into the darkness. Shit, she muttered, her hands tightening on the wheel. He was faster than she'd thought. But she had the advantage. Her patrol car was built for this, and she knew these roads better than anyone. Reaching for her radio again, she said, "I need the nearest units." The sentence was cut off as the SUV's taillights suddenly disappeared. Rebecca blinked. It couldn't be. There were no turns, no dead ends, no places to hide that quickly. Her heart pounded in her chest. She let off the gas, her eyes darting around. There were only empty fields on either side of the road, no houses, no hiding spots. The only thing that was different was a faint line of tire tracks that turned off the main road and into the darkness. Rebecca narrowed her eyes. He had deliberately taken the road off limits to vehicles, a road only someone truly familiar with would dare venture down. This wasn't the act of a fugitive. This was the act of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. Worry crept into her mind, a vague feeling she didn't want to acknowledge, fear. But there was no turning back. If she lost him now, she might never find out who he really was. Rebecca swallowed, her grip on the steering wheel tightening. She took a deep breath, forcing herself to stay calm. She had to decide quickly. Either wait for backup, or continue on into the darkness where he had disappeared. She chose the latter. She guided the cruiser onto the dirt road. The headlights cut across the rough terrain, reflecting the rainwater that had been left on the wet ground. The SUV's tires left clear tracks in the soft mud, as if the past itself was imprinting itself on the present. He had to be near. But as she drove deeper, a sense of unease crept into her chest, tightening her hold on every breath. She had been here before. Her hands tightened on the wheel, her knuckles white. The past came flooding back, 12 years ago. A case she had never been assigned. She had been new to the force, still holding on to the innocent belief that anything could be solved if she dug deep enough. Justice always prevailed. She had thought so. But the missing officer case had proven otherwise. A patrolman had called in to check on an old farmhouse outside the city limits, and then vanished without a trace. When the police arrived, there was nothing but heavy silence. No cars, no bodies, no signs of a struggle. Just a strange symbol burned into the door of a warehouse. Now, miles away, she was facing it again. Her headlights were focused on a familiar symbol, this time carved into the side of an abandoned house. Time had worn the wood, but the mark was still sharp, as if someone had carved it recently. An SUV was parked next to it. The engine was off, but the heat lingered in the air. He was still here. Her stomach clenched. This was no coincidence. This was a trap. She reached for the radio, her voice sharp as steel. I have located the suspect's vehicle. Request immediate backup. A voice spoke from the darkness, low and steady, too close. You should not have followed me, officer. She spun, her hand flying to her holster. Too late. A shadow flashed out of the headlights, fast and deadly. Before she could draw, a rough hand gripped her wrist. Instinct took over. She twisted, twisting, yanking her arm free. She stumbled back, her gun flying from its holster in one fluid motion. But she knew, deep down, that this time, like 12 years ago, the answer would not be as simple as a bullet. And the man before her was more than just a suspect. Rebecca's heart was pounding in her chest, her breath coming in short gasps as if each beat carried an invisible tension. But her hand was steady, her index finger still on the trigger. Brandon Ellis stood just beyond the reach of her cruiser's beam. His face was only partially illuminated, shadows covering his sharp eyes. For the first time, she saw him clearly, no mask, no rush or uncertainty. He was strangely calm, too obvious, too confident. His expression was unreadable, but it wasn't just the lack of fear that unsettled Rebecca. It was the way he looked at her. As if he'd been expecting this for a long time. Slowly, Brandon raised his hand. His voice was deep but ominously calm. I'm unarmed. Rebecca didn't lower her gun. On the ground. Now. A flicker of amusement crossed Brandon's lips, almost a smile, but not quite. If I wanted to hurt you, I would have done it a long time ago. The words made her heart skip a beat, but she didn't let it show. Take control, don't let him get away with it. I won't say it again. She stepped forward, the gun still aimed at his chest. Brandon exhaled, a soft exhale through his nose, and then he did exactly as she asked. He clasped his hands behind his head, kneeling down slowly, almost, deliberately. Something was wrong. He didn't fight back. Didn't run. It was too easy. Rebecca reached for the radio. I have the suspect in custody. No response. She frowned, checked the radio again, turned the dial. Nothing. Like the signal had been cut off completely. A feeling of unease spread through her chest, a slow but clear realization dawning. She was alone. No one will answer. Brandon said, his voice steady to the point of fear. Almost too normal for a man kneeling at gunpoint. Rebecca gripped the gun, her mind racing, sifting through old cases, past faces. But nothing matched him. No memory of Brandon Ellis. I've never met you before. Her voice was steady, unwavering. Brandon exhaled, a low breath, as if he had been expecting this answer. You should leave things alone. The words, so simple, sent a chill down Rebecca's spine. Not out of fear. Something deeper. A realization. There was truth in his voice. And suddenly, she understood. This wasn't a manhunt. Not the mission she thought she was on. This was about her. She wasn't the hunter. The prey. Brandon had been waiting for her. All this time. Every day, every hour, every moment had been built up to this moment, when Rebecca had finally found him. But why was her mind so sharp? Why hadn't she hesitated for a second? He knew her. And that meant, this wasn't an accident. Stop the chase. He'd let her catch him. On purpose. A plan laid out long ago. But even as she held the gun to him, that voice, her voice had a new appeal, a strangeness he'd never heard before. You're going to tell me what's going on. She commanded. And he knew he couldn't hide. Brandon didn't move, his face expressionless. But his eyes, those eyes, held something deeper. A memory. A recognition. I already know. Rebecca gritted her teeth. No, she didn't. But every sense screamed that she should know. I don't have time for games. She had chased him. He had resisted. And now he was speaking with hidden meaning. Brandon shifted slightly, not out of fear, but as if he were weighing whether to tell the truth. I ran to make sure you followed. She tightened her grip on the gun. Why? Why was his gaze so calm? So steady, so steady. Because they lied to me. Rebecca held her breath. Every muscle in her body locked. She didn't want to ask. She didn't want to take what he said seriously. But, part of her, the part that never stopped asking, needed to know. Who lied to me? Brandon clenched his jaw. A brief hesitation. But that hesitation told her everything. He was afraid of them. And if Brandon was afraid of anyone, it meant something more serious than she'd thought. Rebecca's mind raced through memories. Missing cops. People the department had stopped talking about. Files closed for no reason. Vague reminders from her superiors telling her not to dig. She'd obeyed. She'd forgotten. It was easier than asking questions no one wanted to answer. But now, standing in the dark, facing the man she was supposed to arrest, a different feeling rose within her. Certainty. The feeling that something had been wrong all along. Brandon swallowed, then said slowly. They didn't just disappear. Rebecca's blood ran cold. She didn't want to hear the rest. But she had no choice. Because whatever he was about to say, it would change everything. Rebecca's breath caught in her chest, like a heavy boulder pressing down on her, bit by bit, crushing her down. Her pulse quickened. No, it couldn't be. They weren't just gone. They couldn't just be gone. Brandon's words were still echoing in her head, reverberating like an echo in an endless hallway. But she wasn't ready to accept it. Not yet. You're lying. Her voice was sharper than she'd intended. A crack in her own control. Her grip tightened on the gun, still aimed at him. But deep down, she wasn't sure what she was doing anymore. If Brandon had wanted to hurt her, he would have. He didn't flinch. Didn't blink. Didn't fight back. She took a deep breath, trying to regain control. Start over. Brandon knelt down slowly, holding his hands up to show that he was no threat. But his eyes, they held something more terrifying than any weapon, the truth. It started long before you put on that uniform. His voice was low, but each word carried weight. Your department has secrets. Secrets they will bury to the grave. Rebecca didn't blink, but her mind was racing. What do you mean? Officer Hayes was one of those secrets. The name made Rebecca freeze. She knew about Hayes's unit. Knew that they had disappeared on a mission more than 12 years ago. She'd read the files. A standard investigation. An abandoned property. A suspect to be apprehended. But they never returned. She swallowed, her chest tightening. They disappeared. Brandon nodded. That's what they told you. A pause. Then he continued, his voice slow, as if making sure each word sunk into her mind. But what if I told you, some of them came back? Rebecca's body stiffened. Her blood stopped flowing. That can't be. Her voice trailed off, but she held on. If it was true, there would be records. Someone would have said something. Brandon laughed, a deep, humorless laugh. You really think they'd leave evidence? Rebecca hated that she couldn't come up with a solid answer. Everything she knew, everything she believed, was shaking. Brandon leaned forward, keeping a safe distance. They weren't just officers. They were part of something bigger. The survivors weren't allowed to talk. A chill ran down Rebecca's spine. You mean, she couldn't get the other word out. Brandon's jaw tightened. Have you ever wondered why no one asks questions? Why no family demands answers? Rebecca didn't speak. Couldn't speak. Because for the first time in her career, she realized there were things she had never seen, or rather, things she had never been allowed to see. And now she wasn't sure if she wanted to know the truth. As soon as she stopped, Rebecca felt a lump like a stone in her stomach. As if her body knew something before her mind did. Brandon's eyes locked on hers, sharp and unblinking. Not out of hostility. But because he was waiting. Because they were made to stop. She gritted her teeth. It didn't make sense. It couldn't be. But even as she told herself so, her mind raced back, each hazy memory falling into place. Every time she asked questions about that night. The way all her questions had been silenced. The way the case had disappeared as if it had never existed. Brandon's voice was steady, but it was that steadiness that sent a chill down Rebecca's spine. You think this is about me? He shook his head, the smile not reaching his eyes. No, Rebecca. This is about you. Her breath caught. Something in her chest, sharp and icy. Brandon exhaled, his eyes never leaving hers. You were supposed to be one of them. A chill ran down her spine. The silence between them stretched, heavy as a ghost. One of them? Her voice was dry, but she knew the answer before he could say it. Brandon looked at her, unblinking. As if he were waiting for her to piece it all together. You were supposed to be involved in that case. Rebecca's stomach twisted. It was as if the air around her had thickened, pushing her down into the abyss of truth. She had been there, 12 years ago. She had been in the loop. She had been on that call. Had been at the scene. But at the last minute, she had been reassigned. She had never wondered why. Until now. Brandon's voice dropped, each word a whisper of fate. They didn't save you, Rebecca. They just spared you. Her hand tightened on the gun, shaking uncontrollably. Because deep down, she knew Brandon wasn't lying. And that meant, everything she'd ever believed in was a lie. Her whole life, her whole career, rested on a shaky foundation she didn't even recognize. The rules she obeyed, the orders she followed, the badge she wore on her chest, did they all mean anything? Or were they just part of something bigger, more twisted, something she'd never seen? Her heartbeat pounded in her ears. Everything else, the night air, her own breathing, was strangely still. Brandon didn't move. He waited. Waiting for her to decide. Rebecca had spent her whole life believing in the system. Injustice. But now, faced with a man who shouldn't exist, she realized, maybe justice isn't about following orders. Maybe justice is about looking the truth in the face. No matter how much the truth terrified her. She exhaled. Slowly lowered the gun. Brandon's shoulders relaxed a little, but he didn't look relieved. He looked prepared. You're making the right decision. Rebecca shook her head, but this time, there was something different in her eyes. A gleam of determination. A gleam of determination. I'm making my own decisions. Her voice was calm, but her heart was pounding. For the first time all night, she felt in control. Brandon smiled, a brief, fleeting smile like moonlight hidden by clouds. But just then, a distant light pierced the darkness. A set of headlights appeared on the hill. Rebecca's stomach clenched. She knew this was coming, but she hadn't thought it would be this soon. Brandon tensed. She could feel it in his breath. The backup she'd called earlier was here. But not for her, for him. Rebecca had two choices: let them take him away and close the story forever, or do something that would change her life forever. Brandon looked into her eyes, pleading, but there was no weakness. Just the bare truth. If they catch me, I can't survive. And somehow, she knew it was true. Not conjecture, not irrational fear. It was the truth. Rebecca tightened her grip on the radio. Her hands shook not with fear but with awareness. She'd spent too many years asking the wrong questions. Now she had the answers. And it was time to act. Her entire career had been based on the belief that the truth would always come out. But tonight, she learned that sometimes the truth doesn't come out on its own. Sometimes you have to fight for it. And the real question is, are you willing? When faced with the choice between what's right and what's easy, are you willing to risk it all for the truth? Because sometimes, doing the right thing isn't about following the rules. Sometimes, it means breaking them. And not everyone is brave enough to make that choice.